So that was by Mark Kitchens of the bands Slow Draw and I always forget the second band. Heather, would
Stone Machine Electric.
Stone Machine Electric. So thank you, Mark, for creating a theme song for us. This is the first episode of the new Happy Hour with Heather and Guest experience. I'm going to call it an experience because there's going to be video and audio. So yeah, Heather, great to begin this new endeavor with you.
Yes, I'm very excited about this. I'm very excited about, we talked about the format ahead of time, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, we can always, we're always going to change things up too, but I think this is going to be pretty unique to us, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I really like this first band that we're going to talk about, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, me too. For those of you who may know us from other things, we're going to keep a lot of the elements of the Happy Hour with Heather and Guest Facebook group and A Fistful of Faceful, but we're also going to bring some new things to the table. So kicking things off, we're going to be talking about a band that Heather had suggested called Low Orbit. We'll be discussing a couple of the songs from all of their albums. And then Heather has been kind enough to create a playlist on YouTube. So if you would like to hear these songs in full and follow along, you can do that separately. Listen to the song, watch a video, come back, hear us talk about it. Or you could do all the songs at once and then all the video at once. It's really up to you.
Yeah, and when we post this episode, we're going to post video and audio from the podcast, and then we'll also post a link to the YouTube playlist.
Definitely. So should we jump right in with both feet to Low Orbit?
Yes. And Low Orbit, they're based out of Ontario, Canada. And from their Bandcamp page, this is how they describe themselves, which I think is great. Through solar skies, 3 journey from the center of the earth to a time and space unknown, a place where the explosive sounds of heavy groove and psychedelic rock collide to create a home just above Earth in low orbit. And that is actually their name, and then their debut album, which is self-titled, which we're going to talk about. And we picked 3 songs from each of their albums, and then they have a new one coming out, and they just released 1 song. So we'll talk about that one too. But their self-titled, their first release was November 2014. And for me, it's very nostalgic because when I first started getting into stoner rock, this was one of the albums that really got me into stoner rock. And in my opinion, this is an essential album. It's totally essential, and I love space rock. I don't know if I've ever told you how much I love space rock, but I love it. And this album, it's a mixture of stoner rock and space rock, it's phenomenal. So I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, right off the bat, we've got a Heather guarantee seal of approval. So if you're looking for stoner space rock, either to get into or to complete your set, then get Low Orbit's self-titled album.
Yes, definitely. And the songs that we picked off this one, the first one is International Base Station. And This one, the opening riff got my attention right away. I love the space themes. This is a great example of space rock. And for me, it's one of the songs that stands out on the album.
I would agree with you. Well, first of all, International Base Station, what a great pun, and definitely gives you the impression of what you're in for with the rest of the album. I classified it, as sort of a stoner space combo. It reminded me a little bit of the band The Sword, just in terms of the way the riffs were put together and the sound, sort of like their later albums, not necessarily the first one, but they did a concept album, Warp Riders, and then they did another one, and the other one's name I can't remember, but they had a song called Apocryphon that I really enjoyed. And anyway, Low Orbit, at least International Base Station, reminded me of that, and I was a huge fan. So right off the bat, I was hooked.
Yeah. And the song that we both agreed on, it's called Angel Lust. Great name of a song. We both agreed that this song is, another one of the songs that stands out on the album. Has a great bass line. When it goes into the instrumental part towards the end of the song, the way that the drums and the guitar comes in is absolutely phenomenal.
Definitely. This one, Angel Lust, I wrote down that it takes you on a sonic journey, like a spacey sonic journey. And it reminded me of a band called The Machine, which I got into. I sort of went down the YouTube rabbit hole one day, which is kind of, they're like a space rock band, particularly a song called Solar Corona. But yeah, no, this is just more of really great sort of stoner space rock to just, I could listen to this all day.
Yeah. And the other song is called Tree Howl. And I love the lyrics here. I drive my car to the edge of destiny, planet on the backdrop of my galaxy. Am I a god of tidal universe or just a victim of Satan's big black curse?
Yeah, that's like Yates or any of those heavy hitters.
I mean,
But no,
yeah.
that's a great. I mean, that's a great metaphor, illusion, what have you. It's got all the trimmings talking about Satan and God, talking about steering around the galaxy and whatnot. But yeah, what did I had sort of a cool. It had more of a bluesy feel. Some of their stuff I had just written down, like spacey or stoner. This one I wrote blue stoner, which I can only imagine I was trying to say blues. And I compared it to a band from DC called Dead Meadow. That's what it sort of reminded me of a little bit. So I tended to go a little bit more along the lines of comparing what I thought it sounded like with bands I was familiar with. But they're very much their own band. From here on out, I think I could say safely to people, oh yeah, no, that sounds like Low Orbit, as opposed to saying, geez, this band Low Orbit sounds a lot like someone else.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Now the next album that they came out with was November 2017. It was called Space Cake. And I love the cover art on it. It's really, really, really beautiful. And when you look at it and you hear the songs on the record and then you look at the cover art, you can definitely understand why they chose that as their cover art, because it goes along with the songs on the record perfectly. Um, the songs on this one, the first one is called Shades of Neptune. And I like how it references Space Cake in the lyrics. It's a great space rock song, and it's got a really incredible vibe to it.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate how you went a little bit more in depth than I did in terms of like analyzing the lyrics or thinking about themes. I just have written down Shades of Neptune, more trippy bluesy. So so if you're looking for more of an acid kind of feel to it, still with kind of the space rock, but a little bit more of a blues vibe, then Space Cake was definitely the album for you. But that's about as far in terms of analysis as I went. And I don't think you're going to find slower, more trippy bluesy in any book, or any sort of genre. So that's what I'm aiming to do, is break new ground. So
Yes.
hopefully one day someone will go into a record shop and say, "Hey, where's the trippy bluesy section?"
Yeah. That definitely should be its own genre right there.
Yeah. Well, I think this is how those sorts of things started. Like doom metal probably started with two people, talking about how like Black Sabbath's fourth album had really incredible topics and subject matter, and the lyrics in it had an ominous sound. Sounded like doom. Hey, that's a great title for a genre.
Yep,
Sort
we
of
have a
like
new genre.
it's sort of like trippy bluesy.
Trippy bluesy. Well, the next song that I thought was a standout on this record is called Venus. And when the guitar comes in, it is so good. And this is a song that definitely will take you away. It can, it'll take you away.
Definitely. I see now, unfortunately, I don't have notes written for either Venus or the next song. What I do have is something completely different. I've written down different style slash slower, more trippy bluesy again. So I don't know if that was meant for Venus or Machu Picchu, which is the next song.
Oh,
So
okay.
so
Well,
I'm probably going to have to tap out with regard to giving any sort of credible insight to the next songs.
Machu Picchu, we both agreed on that one. Yeah.
Right. For those of you who are interested, Heather sent me the songs to listen to on both. She sent all three albums. Well, I guess two albums and a single, and then we both suggested which tracks to listen to. So if there were ever tracks that we both suggested, those would be automatic. So Machu Picchu was one of the tracks that we had both suggested. So I must have liked it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, the song it's a journey. And you're probably what you wrote down, I think probably goes along with this song.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay. So I think it was probably for Machu Picchu, different style, slower, more, but I made sure to add more trippy bluesy.
Trippy
So
bluesy.
here we go. I'm feeling like this has become like it's like Dr. Seuss writing an album review.
Well, we could just do loved it,
Right.
hated it.
Of course, of course. And we might, who knows? That may be what this evolves into.
Yeah, loved it. Well, the new album that they have coming out is called Crater Creator, and they haven't given a release date yet, but it said October or November of this year. and they released a song called Creator. And boy, oh boy, this song, it's a lot heavier. The tone, it's a lot thicker. It makes me really, really, really excited for this album coming out. The song is excellent, and I'm hoping that they release it in October.
Yeah, I will. Well, I certainly would want them to release it sooner. The sooner, the better. But it's been interesting noting the sort of the tonal changes between the self-titled album Space Cake and now Creator, or at least the one song Creator. I've written that it had a darker bluesy feel. It is much heavier, and it changes towards the last. I liked how there was a change within the last third of the song. Not that the song got progressive or anything like that and went in a different direction, but it just seemed to sort of give a little bit of a hint of a change. So
yeah, it's a very interesting song. The way that it's put together, you can't really define it with just one, genre. It kind of weaves in and out of different genres, and it's I'm really excited about what they're doing.
Yeah, well, I had not heard of Low Orbit before you pointed them out to me. I think I, at some point, probably would have discovered them just from my various spelunking down YouTube. But they're they're a great, like you had said, if you're into sort of that stoner space rock vibe, they're definitely a band that should be on your radar. So yeah. I'm glad that you brought them to my attention.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, and the next episode we do, it's going to be a band that you pick. So
yes, so I've got big shoes to fill, but I'm looking forward to it.
Now, we were gonna one thing that we had talked about, which is going to be kind of a fun trip down memory lane. One of the things that we talked about is music that helped us through. And I want to hear yours first.
Okay.
What you picked.
Sure. Well, yeah. So one of the things that we had talked about was just how music has the ability to be really supportive when you're going through difficult times. Sometimes you just want to throw the headphones on and not deal with certain things, or deal with it and use the music to kind of help get you through. So I remember in 1991, Nevermind came out by Nirvana, and I was not familiar with them at the time at all. I hadn't heard. I lived in New York, so I think Bleach had probably been released, but it hadn't made its way to the East Coast yet. And I remember I was in a band at the time, so I was in probably 7th grade, and I played guitar, and I was in a band, and the lead singer and I went to the Virgin Megastore, no, HMV, which at the time I had been told stood for Her Majesty's Video, which is incorrect. But I was a sucker, so I believed that it was a British company called but that they kept the acronym HMV, but they said that in the US it stood for The Music Lives. So the H and the, why it wasn't like TML, should have probably told me that I was being, bamboozled. But again, I was a gullible kid. So before I get too out of the topic of the story, the lead singer bought a cassette tape of Nevermind because he had heard that it was a great album. And I remember we went back to the drummer's house where we would rehearse, and we listened to Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I was hooked. I remember thinking, okay, it's a shame that they wrote this song just for me. Like, they didn't consider that other people out there would love it, as much as I did. They were like, oh, here's this seventh grade kid in New York. Let's write this song exclusively for him. And then I listened to the rest of the album, and I remember the song Something in the Way. That's the song that I picked. I remember having to do a poetry exercise for homework. We had to write what's known as a sestina poem, where you keep using the same details, but you switch them up. So if, like, the first line is, the man went to the store and bought some milk and put it in his book bag, then in the next couple of sentences, you'd have to keep the milk and the store in the book bag, but you'd have to change up how they were being used. This is a horrible example of what a sestina poem is, but that's what I remember from 1991. And I just remember I had the song on repeat, and I must have listened to it for like 3 hours straight as I just wrote this thing in one sitting. And I remember just certain lyrics, really, it's okay to eat fish because they don't have any feelings. And then I just remember that it was such a simple sort of sound, it was such a low, like 2-chord song. And I just remember really connecting with the lyrics. To just feel it like, oh, this feels really familiar. And there was sort of comfort in that familiarity. But at the time I remember thinking, wow, this is so profound. And then hearing years later that sometimes Kurt Cobain would write the lyrics, 45 minutes before they recorded, because he didn't have, he had temporary lyrics. And then I remember watching a documentary about the recording of it. And Butch Vig, who was the producer, said that Kurt Cobain never liked the sound in the room. So he went into the recording where the engineers sat and began playing the guitar. And they ended up recording it in the engineering room. They shut off all the fans, they shut everything off. And they said it was difficult for Dave Grohl to play as light as he needed to on the drums because he's a very heavy-hitting drummer. So anyway, have I gone off on enough tangents? But
I remember, when Nevermind came out, one of my favorite albums, hands down, one of my favorite albums of all time. I remember music at that time was a lot of hair bands, a lot of power rock, a lot of glam rock. And it just seemed to me at that time, it was a lot of same old recycled bands and music, and everything to me a lot of it started sounding the same. And I remember at that time, music got kind of boring for me at that time. And then Nirvana came out, and I I remember thinking, wow, there are actually other bands out there that sound different, have a different sound, and they just completely blew me away. And they kind of opened the door for a lot of other bands to come through. And that's when all the Seattle bands started coming on the scene. And it was just a really, really incredible time for music. And the song, Something in the Way, that's one of my favorite songs on the record. And it's really simple, but it's beautiful at the same time.
Definitely. I mean, it helped me sort of navigate through junior high school, which was a difficult adjustment. And, that was sort of the soundtrack of that year. And then I remember, I don't think I got into In Utero when that came out, I think in 93. I just still listened to Nevermind. Um, and then eventually I started to listen to their other albums. Like I found Bleach and went back to the beginning. But yeah, I mean, I still will throw on Nevermind every so often. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those classic albums. But that song helped me through seventh grade.
Yeah. And mine is at a time where I was probably close to that age, maybe a little older. And in Illinois, people in the Midwest might know about job called detasseling corn, and a lot of junior high and high school kids do it as a summer job, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And it was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going into cornfields when there was dew on the corn, and you would get absolutely soaking wet, and then the sun would come out, and then you would literally bake to death. And then you'd walk up and down the rows of corn in these massively huge cornfields, and you would take the tassels off of the corn. Well, at that time, I don't know how, but somehow I had a tape of Krokus. And so that was what I was listening to, was Krokus. And that, riding on the bus, going back and forth to these cornfields, going through the cornfields. And I just remember listening to Krokus over and over and over again. And that's what helped me get through that. And Screaming in the Night, that song is, one of the song that I picked. And boy, that song is fun to sing to at the top of your lungs. It's just fun. And that is the music that got me through that at that time. So you know what? I actually have a Krokus vinyl in my collection. So
There you go.
Yeah. So one of the bands that was really popular, in their time.
I actually wasn't as familiar with Krokus. I hadn't heard the song until you had recommended it. So it was interesting to kind of come at it from a different perspective, where I was listening to it probably, 20 years after it had come out, and or 30 years or whatever. But I did really enjoy it, and I could certainly see singing it at the top of your lungs, and most importantly, I could see how it would get you through detasseling season. But
Yeah.
it very much felt like it would have fit in with that sort of new wave of British heavy metal type music. It's certainly not. I wouldn't categorize it as that, but I could see Krokus being played, with like a Judas Priest, like on some classic rock station. And next up, we've got Painkiller by Judas Priest, and we've got Screaming in the Night by Krokus, and we've got Winds of Change by Scorpions. And it would sort of feel like that's that.
Yeah. And it seems like all the bands at that time had to have at least one love song on their record. And that's one of the things that has changed, as far as like in heavy music, because the stoner and the doom music that we listen to, they don't really have love songs, but the bands back in the day, there was at least one love song on the record.
Oh yeah, there had to be. There had to
Yeah.
be at least one. And I mean, that was my go-to karaoke jam for a while, was singing "Without You" by Motley Crue. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I was definitely, but yeah, no, it was interesting how that sort of was phased out. You know,
Yeah.
once the '90s took over, there was less. It became much more separated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, no, and now now I'll have to go and find more Krokus because
Yeah. They have a lot of really great songs.
yeah, well they're a pretty prolific band.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
if you're not familiar, first of all, if you're not familiar with Low Orbit, you should probably pause the video and go check out the playlist. Um, and then afterwards, go find yourself some Krokus. And
Yeah. And
don't
if you haven't heard Nirvana, I definitely get Nirvana.
right
One one
if you haven't heard Nirvana, you're probably watching the wrong video right now. So I will echo Heather's sentiments though. You should just turn this video off and go listen to Nirvana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, Krokus, Nirvana, those got us through some times. It'll be interesting to see other bands and other times that we've needed music to help get us through. And Low Orbit again is a great recommendation for to kick this off. Um, the last thing we were going to talk about was um, movie recommendations with regard to movies that you should see at some point, that are just necessary viewing, if you will. And we had talked briefly about the Terminator franchise, the first two films, because after that you're sort of, just go off into uncharted territory that should have remained uncharted.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I agree with that.
but yeah, we I had suggested the first Terminator film as mandatory viewing. You had suggested the second one, and I think sort of looking back on it now, because I saw the second Terminator film first, when I think I may have seen the original film when I was too young to really understand what was going on. And then in the summer of '91, when Terminator 2 came out, I remember seeing that and loving it. So I think if you were going to ask 12-year-old me what's required viewing, I would probably agree with you and say Terminator 2, because it's much more of an action-oriented thrill ride. I think there's certainly more going on, and it's much more fast-paced, and it's doing at the time what was groundbreaking work with special effects. So I think in that capacity, it would probably, I think in terms of just original storytelling and sort of the cool aspect of time travel, and the fact that Michael Biehn is one of the leads and he's a favorite actor of mine. But I don't know. I think just in terms of the Terminator being a landmark sort of film, kind of going back to the beginning, that would be the reason for me making it mandatory viewing. Like if you want to see really sort of where one of the sci-fi movies that kind of kicked it off, that sort of took it from, Plan 9 from Outer Space, or The Day the Earth Stood Still, and sort of injected it with a really cool, where, like that and Blade Runner, and Dune, those were the sort of movies that kind of took over and redefined the genre.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
go on, please.
yeah. Well, Terminator is an excellent movie, for sure. Um, Terminator 2, in my opinion, is the better of the two. And it's very rare that a sequel could be even considered to be better than the original. It doesn't happen very often. But in this case, I think the sequel is better than the original. I think Terminator 2 is arguably one of the best action movies of all time. And it is, and I'm not, action is not that's not even normally what I watch. So, and Terminator 2 is my favorite movie of all time. And action movies are not normally what I watch, but it is a great action movie. But the themes of it, it goes beyond action. It's action sequence after action sequence, which is really cool, has really cool special effects. But there's more to the movie than that. I think it advances what Terminator started as far as the story is concerned. I think Terminator 2 advanced it to the next level and kind of gave us some closure on what their mission was. And I think it as far as what their mission was and what they did in the movie, I think it advanced the plot a lot further along.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see what I don't necessarily know if I would have like, and again, this is me talking about it now, looking back on it. I don't know if I would have liked a lot more of those questions answered that the first one brought up. I sort of was happy leaving it, sort of paradoxical. The other thing is, I don't know, looking at it now, whether or not I would be able to be as invested with Edward Furlong as I had been back in '91. And I don't know necessarily now how I feel about Sarah Connor's transformation from being someone who needed protection to someone who's essentially trained for Judgment Day.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know how I liked that character progression. But that being said, I can't really take much away from the film itself. It certainly was an enjoyable film that when I watched it, and it's probably worth revisiting at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would say, which is interesting because it's unlike, I would recommend watching Evil Dead 2 over Evil Dead because I think it's a superior film. And I think, with certain, you could suggest that The Empire Strikes Back does more with the story, has more interesting twists and stuff than the first one did. But you sort of look at Star Wars as being the landmark film that kind of set everything in motion. So I think that would be my sort of go-to recommendation. Like if you're looking for, something unique that sort of was the originator of a lot of things, and just a great movie, go to Terminator. Although at the same point, I see what you're saying, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying about Terminator 2 kind of fleshing out a lot of what was developed and providing some really cool things. So at this point, I would be happy if somebody, watched either of them as mandatory viewing.
Yeah.
I don't.
And the great thing about Terminator 2 also is you can watch it without having seen the first one, because you would understand what's going on and you can keep up with it without necessarily having to watch the first one. I think that Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, I can understand why, because she had been through some stuff, so I can understand why her character kind of went in that direction, and totally badass. And yeah, just what they did. I don't want to give, in case you know have not seen the movie, I don't want to give too much away, but when she escaped out of where she was, when she escaped out of there, and that whole, her psychiatrist, and that whole, that part of the movie was, that was just mind-blowingly good. And I I kind of like where her character went.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, there's certainly nothing. I don't have a problem with it. It was just sort of a preference for, I enjoyed her character more in the first one, as
Yeah.
someone who needed protection rather than someone who had didn't really. I mean, certainly she needed it in the second one, but it was more about protecting the kid, and
Yeah.
less about protecting her. So
Yeah. She was really sweet in the first movie, in
sure,
Terminator. Yeah,
sure.
she was really sweet. Yeah.
But
So,
but yeah, no. I mean, if anyone listens to Low Orbit from this, or rediscovers Nirvana, or discovers Krokus, or decides, you know what, I'm going to watch both Terminator films and have a mini film marathon, then it's a win.
definitely.
So,
Definitely. Yes.
well, I think we've done our jobs with this first episode, and there will be more. Stay tuned. Check out our website. You can find more details. I'm guessing that this episode will probably come out at some point in the beginning of September. So um, when you watch it, then I hope you enjoy it. And unless you have anything else you want to include, Heather.
Well, we do have some things that we're going to give away. So, in future episodes, we will be having some things that we're going to be giving away. So, stay tuned for that. And this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Well, thank you so much. And for those of you watching, tune in next time. We'll have more bands and more movie recommendations, and follow our website for more information.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you.